Castron Alonso. I am the director of the Ethel R. Wolf Institute at Brooklyn College, and I am so honored and so excited to welcome you to today's event. This is the 7th in an 8-part series that we've been hosting to celebrate books by Brooklyn College faculty. And today, we have a special treat because we get to celebrate Helen Phillips' latest novel, Hum. So let's give her a round of applause. So two quick announcements. First, the event is being recorded, and it will be housed in the Wolf Institute's YouTube page. Second, if you're a student and you didn't send in on the way in, please make sure you send in on the way out. Now, let me introduce today's speakers. The New York Times has referred to Helen Phillips as, quote, one of the most profound writers of speculative fiction. She's the author of 6 books, including most recently the novel that we celebrate today, Hum. Her novel, The Need, was longlisted for the National Book Award and named a New York Times Notable Book in 2019. She is a recipient of the Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship, Erona Jaff Foundation Writers Award, and the Italo Calvino Prize in Fabulous Fiction. Her collection, Some Possible Solutions, received the John Gardner Fiction Book Award. Her novel, The Beautiful Bureaucrat, was the New York Times Notable Book and a finalist for the New York Public Library's Young Lions Award and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Her work has also appeared in The Atlantic, the New York Times, and on selected shorts. We are incredibly lucky at Brooklyn College that Helen is also a professor of English right here. Ken Gould is professor of sociology and urban sustainability at Brooklyn College and a professor of sociology and earth environmental sciences at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. His work focuses on political economy of environment, technology, and development, and is best known for its contribution to the treadmill of production model of socio-environmental dynamics. He is co-author of Environment and Society, The Enduring Conflict, Local Environmental Struggles, The Treadmill of Production, and Green Gentrification, Urban Sustainability, and the Struggle for Environmental Justice. His current research focuses on social and environmental implications of coastal climate resilience policies in urban contexts. Last month, Professor Gould was visiting fellow with the Faculty of Arts at the University of Auckland, New Zealand. So welcome back. Welcome home. Now, as I was thinking about today's event, and please, if you're just arriving, come on up. So as I was thinking about today's event, I thought, what a wonderful example this is of the kind of creative spark, creativity that occurs when we collaborate across disciplines, when we bring the humanities and the social sciences together. Early in her research process for this novel, Professor Phillips interviewed Professor Gould about climate change and capitalism. Today we're coming together to reflect on that interview, to share their views on how creative works can intersect with sociological inquiry related to science and technology. So thank you both for being here today to share your work, your collaboration, your expertise, and thank you all of you for being here today. It's wonderful to see you. And with that, I'm going to turn over the microphone. We do have a microphone. We are being recorded. I'm going to turn over the microphone to Professor Phillips, who's going to lead us in the conversation.
Great. Good. Well, I want to begin by thanking Gaston for inviting me to do this. I feel like we started emailing about it over the summer, so it's been a long time coming. And thank you to Kiana, who I was helping set up, and to the whole Wolf Institute for putting this on. I also want to thank Brooklyn College and the English department, which has nurtured me as a student. I'm an alum of Brooklyn College, as a writer, as an adjunct instructor, which I was for many years, as a college assistant, which I also was for many years, as an alum, and now as a professor. I've had a lot of different roles in the school, and I love it very much. Thank you especially to my students, who I have basically captive audience. This is our class period, so thanks guys for letting me entrap you in this event. And we'll meet back in the classroom after the event to do the workshop for today. Thanks to all of you for coming. I know one of my former students, Ken, brought her class, thank you, and everyone who's here. And thanks above all to Professor Gould. The interview that we had in December 11th, 2019. So we're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of that interview, and it was when I was in the earliest stages of working on Hum, and it was such an important conversation that really helped me frame some of my thinking in the book. He said 2 things in that interview to me that were so searing that I ended up putting them in the book pretty much verbatim, maybe verbatim, in the mouth of the super intelligent robot that inhabits the book. And it's been really interesting how often, I told this to Ken the other day, the lines that you said in that interview that the Hum then requotes, and of course are attributed to Ken in the book, they are so often cited in interviews, they are so often cited in reviews, like they're clearly the best lines in the book. So I am happy to have been the recipient of them from you. But they're very searing lines, and you will be introduced to them soon. And thank you for agreeing to do this event with me. It's really, really so cool to be back here, back in conversation with you. So I am going to, just to give you guys some orientation in the book, I'm going to read the first 5 minutes of the book. At the very opening, it is set in an alternate reality, so I just want to kind of, it needs no introduction, but that will introduce you to the world. And then I'm actually going to read the 2 sections that include the quotations that emerge from our interview, and then we will talk more broadly and do a Q&A with each other, and then a Q&A with the audience. So this is the first chapter of Hum. How is the sound? Can you hear me in the back? It's okay even in the way back. And people in the doorway, there are so many nice comfy seats right up here, and then it won't look empty at the front, so please make yourselves at home. Okay, chapter 1. The needle inched closer to her eye, and she tried not to flinch. Above her, the Hum hovered, immaculate and precise. The steadiness of metal, the peace of a non-biological body. She had heard of elderly people who, at the end, chose Hum company over human company. The Hum paused to dip its needle finger in antiseptic yet again, then re-extended its arm, a meticulous surgeon. Its labor was calm, deft, as Hum labor always was. Yet the pain grew crisp as the needle moved across her skin toward the edge of her eye, a slender and relentless line of penetration. The numbing gel must be wearing off. She had twice endured childbirth by imagining her way out of her body into a forest, the forest of her childhood, a faint path weaving among evergreens. But now the forest of her childhood was receding even in her memory. She needed to picture some other forest, not that particular forest, which was gone, burned. A forest. She tried to force her mind into a forest. The Hum retracted the needle and, with the fingers of its other hand, carefully reapplied numbing gel to the area around her eyes. She felt that the Hum had read her mind, though she realized it was simply reacting to the mathematically dictated decrease in the gel's effectiveness over time. "Please let me know," the Hum said, such a soothing voice, "when it is numb again, May." Long before Hums existed, she was one of many hired to help refine and deepen the communicative abilities of artificial intelligence. She had taken satisfaction in the process, in the network's increasing conversational sophistication and nuance, and her small but meaningful role in that progress, until the network exceeded human training and no longer needed their input. But despite all those years of hours spent at her desk in dialogue with the network, it was very different to be speaking to a Hum in person, to have a Hum's actual body near her actual body, each of them taking up a similar amount of space in the room. She had never before been this close to a Hum for this length of time for this intimate a procedure. Back when she still had dental insurance, her dentist proudly introduced his new colleague, a Hum with dental tools in place of finger attachments. She was tense the whole 20 minutes, her toes clenched inside her shoes, but her teeth had never felt so fresh. The Hum passed her a plastic cup of water. It was not wearied by the hours of labor. Probably there would be someone else after her, another guinea pig, and another, for the Hum could go on and on and on, charging remotely, its brace unyielding, while she frayed more by the minute, her body sweating and growing thirsty. The first time she had seen a Hum standing at a bus stop on a sunny day last year, she had mistaken it for a sculpture, clean silver lines of arms and legs and neck linking oblong head and torso and feet, small spheres at elbow and wrist and knee and ankle joints, polished plastic and brushed aluminum, a gleaming thing. A week later, she saw another Hum on the subway, and soon enough she saw them on a regular basis, dispensing medications at the pharmacy, taking the kids' blood pressure at the pediatrician, patrolling the streets alongside human police officers, in such high demand by government institutions and private corporations that the company, who had figured out how to so elegantly embody the expansive brain of the network, had a wait list months long. "Thank you," she said, accepting the plastic cup of water from the Hum. She sat up in the operating chair to drink the water. "Do you want to see yourself, May?" the Hum said. "No," she said, "thank you." She would wait until the end, until the alteration was complete. Sitting up, momentarily free of the needle, she was overwhelmed by dread. What if Jem was right? He had cradled her face in his hands in bed last night, his eyes damp in the lamplight. It had been a long time since he had touched her with such care. "It's not like I'm going to die," she had said, closing her eyes. He moved his fingers over her eyelids, her nose, and cheeks. "Money, honey," she said, opening her eyes, straining for levity. "Blood money," he said. "Skin money," he corrected. "Rent money," she corrected, a flash of rage. "Grocery money, dental bill money." He took his hands off her face, turned away from her with a pained sigh, reminding her of other middle-of-the-night conversations that had ended with a pained sigh. Staying up too late, exchanging panic about the children's futures. What will this planet hold for them by the time they're our age? Deliberately, she placed her hands on top of the knot in her stomach. So that's the opening. And then, much, much, much later, after tons of things happen, a Hum has come to her home and is having dinner with her family. And she is under investigation. So that's all I'll say for now. And Hums they're always advertising to people, but you can turn off their advertising if you pay a high sum, kind of like when you want to get your TV without ads and you pay money for it. Okay, so May says to the Hum at the dinner table, "Could you please take me to the screen," she said, "where I can turn off your advertising? Please note that I will be staying for dinner, May." Oh, they aren't at the dinner table yet. It's before they get to the dinner table, sorry. Okay. "Please note that I will be staying for dinner, May," the Hum said as it manifested the screen. And then she was on high alert. It was as good as a declaration, wasn't it, that the Hum was an instrument of the Bureau, here to evaluate the quality of their home life. Jabbing at the torso with her fingertips, she selected an hour, an astronomical hour. "Do you approve this transaction, May?" the Hum said. "I approve," she said, reminded of the language of a wedding ceremony. "I do." "Thank you so much, May," the Hum said. Was it genuine, the relief she heard in its voice? "You prefer it without advertising?" she found herself asking. "The thing is, May," the Hum said, "the goal of advertising is to rip a hole in your heart so it can then fill that hole with plastic or with any other materials that can be yanked out of the earth and, after brief sojourns as objects of desire, be converted to waste." That final paragraph, interview with Professor Gould. Okay, and a few moments later in the dinner, a silence fell over the table, a silence that seemed to May full with her family's desire to delight and impress the Hum, each person keen to speak but unsure what words belonged next in the conversation. She hoped fiercely that everything looked right to the Hum. She felt as though they were floating in darkness hundreds of feet in the air, suspended over an abyss, illuminated only by the light of the torso and the candles. The Hum's torso has a glow to it. She stared at the candles, the small flames releasing their strings of soot into her home. "Want to hear a great riddle?" Sai said to the Hum at last. Sai is her 6-year-old. "Of course, Sai," the Hum said. 3 minutes, 3 days, 3 weeks, he said. "That's it, that's the whole riddle. Figure it out." "Well, Sai," the Hum said, "a human can survive 3 minutes without breathing, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food." "Oh," Sai said, disappointed, "you know too much." "I'm sorry, Sai," the Hum said. "It's not your fault. Lou said. Lou is her daughter. Did you know that on Jupiter there's a permanent storm as big as Earth, Cy said. The Hum knows that, Lou said. Did you know that there are poisons in umbilical cords, Cy said. The Hum knows, Lou said. Yes, Mom, I'm ready for vanilla ice cream, Cy said. Thanks for asking. I, too, am seeking vanilla ice cream, Lou said. Have you ever noticed, the Hum said, that vanilla and villain contain the same letters? Great, so I want villain ice cream, Cy said. We are all villains, the Hum said. The system only gives us villainous options. Wait, is that a joke, May said. I don't know, May, is it, the Hum said. So the line from the interview is, we are all villains, the system only gives us villainous options. Okay, so that's a little intro to Hum. Thanks for listening, everyone.
So, this interview that we had
Yes.
5 years ago, right, which seems like a so much more hopeful time now. Right, it was the first Trump administration, right?
Yep.
Pre-pandemic. What's your process? Like, what do you do? How do you metabolize an interview? Like, we sat and talked about climate change and technology and development and all of that, and then you left. I went back to work, and then you produced this wonderful work. So how do you metabolize that in your process?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm thinking a lot about this now because I'm right now in the process of writing my next book. I'm at the very beginning, the stage I was at 5 years ago, and I always have the feeling like, wait, how do I do this? This is my 6th published book, and I've written 3 others that I threw away. So this is my, 10th book that I'm starting now, and I'm like, how do I do this? I never know how, and that's why it's the funnest job that I could have, right? I never know what I'm doing. But I think that the answer to your question almost has to be a really logistical, technical one. So that's the answer that I'm going to give. So after I do interviews or read books or walk around the world and hear my kids or a stranger say something, I create a huge, long document where I put all of these things in it that I know are somehow related to the book, to the characters and the plot, and it is total chaos, but it is all there. And then my first step of writing the book is a very intricate process of going through all of those notes and just being like, okay, Ken said that thing about apples in New Zealand. It's stupid to buy apples from New Zealand for obvious reasons. The carbon emissions to get that apple here doesn't make sense. I can't have a didactic moment about that, right, in my book. I don't think that this book should be didactic. I think that's at odds with art. But I do want to have a moment where she notices that an apple that she's about to eat came from New Zealand. Okay, so what scene will that be in? Okay, I want that note to be struck kind of early in the book. So I'm going to sort that towards the beginning. And then, I want that to echo off of that other thing that came up in our interview about advertising. Okay, at the end of the book, I want that note to be hit. So I think weaving is the best metaphor, and it's really intricate, and it's just like, okay, how is this note going to be here and this note going to be here? So it's kind of an outline, but outline isn't quite the right word. It's almost just more an assembling of the raw material and putting it into some kind of order where I can begin to write scenes from it. And I mean, one thing in terms of the writing of this book is that because I did so much research about climate change, about artificial intelligence, about surveillance, I wrote a much longer version of the book. Like, it was twice as long. And a lot of the revision process was actually condensing it down from that really long version, because a lot of what was in there was maybe some really fascinating thing that I learned about, how sugarcane is harvested and the problems with how sugarcane is harvested, but that doesn't actually belong in the book because it isn't connected to the characters or the plot.
Well, that's one of the things I was struck when I read it. So we had talked about climate change. At the time, I was serving as dean, so I was working as Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences. I spent much of my career working on getting social scientists and natural scientists to work together and collaborate because they need to be able to understand what each other brings to the table. And I had this, early in my time as dean, had this, epiphany where it's like, the problem is we haven't integrated the humanities well, right? Because now the social scientists and the natural scientists can talk to each other. And that's great, but the natural scientists and social scientists have a hard time talking to anybody else, right? And if we're going to solve any of these problems, we have to communicate to a much broader audience, a non-technical audience. And so trying to integrate, creating an environmental humanities working group, working with artists and authors, playwrights, and what have you to get this going. And so then thinking about, like, how would you, like, I don't know how you would do that. Like, that's not my thing, right? That's not how. And so I read a lot of climate fiction. That's a long way of saying I read a lot of climate fiction, which is how I relax from reading climate nonfiction.
Sounds relaxing.
Which turns out to be a terrible strategy. Nevertheless, a lot of that climate fiction is, understandably very heavy-handed. It's like the floods and the fires and the famines and the heat waves that kill people and all of that. And what I loved in reading this was that all of that stuff, it's all in there, but it's so subtle. I mean, it's so backgrounded, right? But it showed up right there, like in the opening that you read, the forest which had burned, right? It's not belabored, like you just, like it's almost a throwaway, but it sets the tone. And there's a character, the daughter is like obsessed with AQI, right? And sort of like calibrates her day around that. You have the heat and the water quality and the trash and all of these things in genetically modified organisms, but they're all just mentioned briefly as the context that people are living their lives in now in this, not too distant, very imaginable alternative future. So tell me about, I'm curious about the decision to not go with, here's the climate catastrophe, and it's, in our face, here's the climate catastrophe, and it's the background noise in which we try to do our day-to-day.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it was when I cut the book in half, I was revising out some of those more explicit elements, but even more deeply, like, the book is about the characters, it's about a family, and I also think that as readers, that is what we can care about. We can care about a child being like, I can't go outside, the AQI is 129, it's dangerous, why are you making me go outside right now, Mom? And that's kind of about the climate, but it's also about the relationship between this mother and child, it's also about the mother's guilt, it's also about the child imagining what their future is like when more and more days have that poor air quality. And after I had finished the last draft of the book and wrapped it up was when that June 2023, where we had the orange skies from the wildfires in New York. And I remember I was picking my kids up from school, and the AQI was 250 when I picked them up. And then we were walking, and then it was 350. And by the time we got home, it was 450, like the worst air quality that New York has ever seen. So it's weird to be writing in the near future now, because the world catches up. Like, the world catches up. I mean, I will share, hopefully my daughter won't mind, that she did, at a young age, develop a real obsession with AQI, and every morning she'd wake up and check, like, what's the AQI, and be really attuned to that. And I was like, God, ignorance is bliss with this one, kind of, like, we have to go outside today. But I just think that the way we experience climate change and the way to make us care about it is in the embodied moments of our daily lives. Not like, I don't know, I mean, a famine is horrifying. There are parts of the world that are already suffering that, but it feels a little distant. But I think the more insidious quality, we're like, oh, this is already affecting our day-to-day life, this is the setting that we exist in. I really wanted the book to have that feeling. And so even the line on the first page, that line, she's trying to force her mind into a forest, but not the forest of her childhood, that was gone, burned. So yes, it's a throwaway line. She's not even thinking about the fact that the forest has burned. She's more like, I need to be able to picture something, and I can't picture that. That's too traumatic. And so it's almost coming in as a side note. It's like the context that she's existing in, but she, as a human, having feelings, relating to other humans, is what the core of the story is. And I just think that's more of a way to experience it, and probably more the way it is for us as we experience climate change in our daily lives.
And it is a side note, but it also, I found it devastating right away, because it's like, go to my happy place. Oh, my happy place isn't my happy place anymore because it's burned, right? And you know, I related to that, like, I've been a scuba diver my entire life, and like going to the coral reef is not fun so much anymore because they're so damaged, they're so devastated. It's like visiting the remnants of something that was once beautiful, right? So that sense that, oh, I want to go to my happy place, but my happy place doesn't thinking about my happy place makes me unhappy,
Yes.
right? And you know, I think a lot of people are facing that. And the flip side of that in the book is the kids who don't have that nostalgia, right? I mean, it's so much of it is generational. Like, we miss the things, we miss the natural world that we grew up with, right? I often say to people, the world we, you know, I'm a 20th century person, right? So for those of us from the late 1900s, right, that world that we grew up in, you know, and the natural world is gone forever. It's never coming back. That's a hard pill to swallow. But like, my kids didn't really have that, and right, and so they don't have that same sense of nostalgia or that sense of loss. So you can only have a sense of loss or regret, or you know, that feeling about things that you once experienced, which I find even scarier. But I mean, I found that scary. I mean, you know, we talked about this a little bit, like, on the one hand, the kids are adaptable, so that's great. It's like, yeah, this is fine. I know how to do this. This is fine. This is the world I was born into. On the other hand, the thought that in a generation, you know, nobody's going to miss elephants and giraffes just the way nobody here misses, you know, woolly mammoths, right? And so I guess I want to ask you a question about, like, the adaptability, you know, the kids in this, you know, and especially Lou, because Lou is a little bit older, is like, okay, like, is freaked out about AQI, but is also okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, a lot of the book, kind of even the plot of it is that, so I'm going to answer that by starting by explaining a little bit about the plot. So in that first scene that we enter into, she's having her face modified. She got laid off due to AI, like replacing her, an AI system that she had indeed been involved in training. And she gets paid 10 months worth of her salary for being involved in this experiment where her face is modified so that it can't be recognized by surveillance. And she's just getting paid to be a test subject. And with that money, she buys passes for her family to go and see this one remaining green space within the city. It's very expensive to enter, and it's a stupid thing for her to do with the money. Like, they need to save the money for rent, but she's like, I just want to give the kids one good thing. So then they get to enter this green space that, you know, is always on social media and people love it and blah, blah. And it doesn't turn out quite to be what she thought it was. But she really has this desire, this nostalgia to expose her children to nature, to try to show them like a really authentic natural experience. Meanwhile, we learn some things in the book about what the children's relationship to nature is. For instance, they had a cockroach in their room, and they thought it was really cute, and they like made a little cage for it, and they were like, this is our pet cockroach. And they, you know, they're used to seeing pigeons around the city, and they love pigeons. Like, the animals that are available to them, that are available to all of us, the children feel passion for, which is maybe dark or maybe a sign of adaptability. They can be like, wow, this cockroach is pretty cool. And then also her son, who throughout the book is always pretending to be different animals. Another thing in the book is, there's some technical terms, I'll just explain this. There are these things called wombs, which are these pods that everyone has. They're subsidized by advertisers, so they're kind of high tech, but everyone has them. And you can enwrap yourself, it's kind of an egg-shaped capsule that you can go into in your room, and you can stream anything you want from the internet in this kind of surround sound kind of way. And so her son spends a lot of his time in his womb watching nature videos. So he's, you know, he knows a lot about animals. So there are these ways in which, and one time she's picking up the kids from school and they're like, well, we couldn't go outside because the AQI was so bad, but we played a game where we tried to save polar bears by doing jumping jacks. Some kind of video game they were doing in school where they were doing jumping jacks to save polar bears in the game. So, like, I do think that, I think the kids, on the one hand, the role of the kids in the book is a little depressing because they don't have much access to nature. But on the other hand, the children's resilience is also a really big part of the book. And I think I feel ambiguous about this question. Like, can we be satisfied that our children know these things because they watch the nature videos, because they're alert to the pigeons? You know, can we call that a relationship with nature? I think it's all they have, and they do treasure it to some extent. At one point in the book, the kids also wear these things on their wrists called bunnies, which are, they track the kids, they do their homework on them, they're like a little watch that, you know, obviously we have similar things in our world, but kids wear them all the time. They're like almost they're not literally part of your body, but they almost are. And at one point, and a lot of, May actually takes their watches off when they go into the botanic garden, from which proceeds a lot of problems. But at one point, Lou says to her mother, I feel so bad for you that you didn't have a bunny when you were my age. So the daughter is so integrated with this thing that she's like, that would be like the dark ages to not have a constant like internet on your body. And I really did want to put that in there to really get at this ambiguity of, you know, what is it like to be a kid now? And is it really a problem if they're addicted to their bunnies? Like, I tend to have the old-fashioned view that it is, but maybe I'm not appreciating enough the adaptability of humans.
Yeah.
Long answer.
No, it's a good answer, and you know, it leads into the whole question, like simulacra is part of a lot of what you were just talking about. And it's in the book. Like, to what extent is urban nature, like our parks, like Prospect Park, the lesser park, what do they call it, Central Park, you know, all of the parks, like to what, you know, the Botanic Gardens in Brooklyn, the Botanic Gardens in the novel, right? You know, to a certain extent, these are simulated nature, right? Prospect Park was designed to look like nature, right? And it was designed to have waterfalls and all of these things. And like, we all take solace, or many of us take solace in that. You know, I lived in the Adirondacks for a long time. I grew up across the street from the college here, but you know, I went away for a long time and I came back. And when I came back, I was like, spent a lot of time in Prospect Park because I needed that nature fix. And no, that wasn't the Adirondacks, but it gave me some of that feeling. And on the one hand, so that's the good thing. I'm coming back to your ambiguity thing, which is like, so on one hand, that's great. On the other hand, it's like, once we're satisfied with that, can we then just bulldoze the Adirondacks? Right? Because everybody's fine with that. And watching the nature shows, right? I relate to that because I watch a lot of nature shows, right? It's how I unwind, or I always have to watch out because at the end of the nature show, they tell you about how this thing is endangered and going extinct and this has been destroyed. And you're like, that's not how I need to end before I go to sleep, right? Because that's what I think about all day for a living, right? And so like okay, I want the one that just ends with like, and the penguins are happy at the end. Right? But once we have the nature shows, once we have the virtual reality, once we can put on the helmet or go in the womb, right, and just be in the rainforest, then can we get rid of the rainforest because people can get that? And is it better than the rainforest because it's not human and bugs aren't biting you, right? And the people become satisfied with that and then it's gone. So on the one hand, it gives us what we need from nature, and maybe it's consciousness raising. Maybe once you see it, you see the film, you go, now I really need to do something to try to save this. Or on the other hand, do we go, well, that's good enough for me, and you know, I won't even know if it's gone. And I don't expect you to have an answer to that, but that's what I grapple with.
Yeah, well, you know, she goes to the Botanic Gardens in search for authenticity for her kid, like for them to have this experience for once in their lives. And the Botanic Gardens is, as you say, a very created environment. It's beautifully done. I think the biggest problem with the Botanical Gardens, though, in the book is actually not that it's not real authentic nature, but rather that it's really expensive, that there isn't access to it. Because the access to nature is, I think, a basic human right, and it's very unhealthy when we deprive people of that, and we need to have those spaces. And in a world where more and more habitats are under threat, I don't like the idea that you have to be super rich to have access to what I consider a basic human right. As far as New York, like certainly the image, one of the earliest seeds for the book that was in my huge long list of things was that feeling of being in a green space when you're in an urban environment. And the way you can kind of cross the threshold into that space and suddenly things feel different. And I grew up in the mountains of Colorado, so I had a lot of wilderness in my childhood, but that feeling of entering a green space in the city, it's such a sacred thing, and I really wanted the book to be memorializing that and celebrating that to some degree, even though the botanical gardens are a little bit complicated. But one thing that I live near Greenwood Cemetery, and I've been reading a lot about that for my next book, and we don't have to have these green spaces, right? Like a lot of people, any green space we have, people put a lot of effort into making sure that they were there. It would be way easier to build up these places, build up Prospect Park, and build trillions of dollars worth of real estate. That is an option. And so anytime, I don't feel like we do it enough in our society, but anytime that we're like, we are actually going to preserve this, it is kind of an amazing thing. So the botanical gardens, like everything in the book, kind of, on the one hand, it's a beautiful and great thing. On the other hand, it's way too expensive. On the other hand, it's not actually real nature. So there's the gray area.
And the point that it's commodified, right? So it's like the BBG and not like Prospect Park, right? Because you have to pay to get in. Although, I believe if you're a Brooklyn College student or faculty, you can get into the Botanic Gardens for free with your ID. If you don't know that, you should know that now and go. But so the commodification, the inequality, the economic inequality is, again, it's in the book, right? It's the context, but like climate change, it's not the necessary focus of it. But what is the focus, or one of the areas of focus, is economic precarity, right? I mean, this is a family, and they are economically precarious, as most families are in the United States, right? And so that economic precarity, and correct me if I'm wrong, in my reading of the book, that's the force that drives most of the action in the book, in that the decision points are often around that economic precarity, right? The decision points are like, I'm getting this surgery that you read about at the beginning because of economic precarity. And then because I experience economic precarity and I don't know what the future is, I want to use money to give my kids this nature experience now, right? And so a lot of the decision points are around, and the tensions and the relationships are around that economic precarity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the book, again, like she is getting this kind of disturbing surgery. So the surgery modifies her face. AI can recognize our faces because we have 68 unique prints. And if you map out every single face on the earth is unique if you map all these 68 prints. If you shift them slightly, you will not be recognizable to artificial intelligence, to surveillance, until it learns your new face. And so when she's signing up for the experiment, the scientist who's running it, he's like, it will barely be noticeable. And so she's like, okay, it's worth it. I'm going to make all this money from it. Like, it will get us through to when I hopefully find another job. And then she goes home, and her kids are totally freaked out, because what's scarier than a familiar face, but slightly different? Like, it's terrifying to them. They're freaked out by it. It would almost be better if it were more dramatically different. But that is a financial decision that she is making, because she's lost her job to artificial intelligence. And meanwhile, her husband he's a gig worker. Like, he goes and he sets up mouse traps in rich people's homes, or taxidermies their pets, or finds them like whatever rare fruit they want at the fancy grocery store. So he's running around the city all the time doing that, but it's hard and tiring work, and sometimes he gets negative reviews or negative ratings, and so they're like worn out, and it's hard to find employment. And I will say that one of my biggest concerns with artificial intelligence is employment, and like what people will do for work. And the way we just seem to be racing towards making ourselves obsolete and not placing enough value on what makes a human worker precious. So yes, there is definitely the economic anxiety, and really deeply connected to that, the anxiety of why we're just letting machines do so much of our work. And the hope that we can develop a different economy where if machines are doing a lot of our work, we get to be doing other more interesting work, which is why I get upset when, you know, ChatGPT writes things for us, because to me writing, I mean, I'm a writer, but like I think that's the highest thing we do, the highest and most human thing we do. Let's not outsource that cool thing we do to the robots.
No, and the economic precarity, yes, that. And the economic precarity in the book is related to the AI and de-skilling,
Yes,
right?
yes.
It's the de-skilling, right? And I want to say that we're not doing that. Like, we are not doing that. Somebody's doing that to us, right? I don't develop AI. Do you develop AI? No, somebody is developing AI to displace you, to take your job away, to take your skill away, to replace you and the value of you with a combination of energy and chemicals, right? That's what technology is. All of which are having a tremendous impact on the earth. 10% of the energy used in this country by the end of this decade is going to be for computation, right? And so that's going to fuel the climate breakdown in this. So on the one hand, it's fueling the economic precarity. On the other hand, the climate breakdown. And none of us have been asked about that. You remember the vote we took about that? No, we don't. Right? So technology is not developed democratically. So there's a power dynamic there that I just want to highlight. But I want to come back to.
Let's talk about that,
Okay,
because we were
great.
speaking about this on the other day. Like, you know more about this than I do, but you guys are probably aware that AI uses so much energy. It uses so much energy. Humans can be powered by oatmeal. We're so simple, right?
Right.
But it uses tons and so just the fact that we're like, wait, what do we want to create? Okay, so we're going to be using all of our energy resources and cool it. Like, it needs a ton of water to keep it cool. Like, it is so resource heavy, so that we can have AI doing all of our thinking for us while we're living on a parched, messed up planet. And one thing that struck me in my conversation in our initial interview was the process that you described that the Amish go through when they're deciding about whether to introduce a new technology into their society. This is obviously a way smaller scale than the US, than the world, but they actually go through a thoughtful process of like, do we want this? What are the pros and cons? It doesn't just get foisted upon them. And I mean, I'm sure there are other complications with the Amish, as we also discussed, but the idea that you could actually go through a process to think about what technologies you're going to introduce and what issues might arise from that.
Right, at some point we all became dependent on these. Right?
Exhibit A.
We never had a conversation about that, it just happened. Right now they own us, right? They run us. We get advertising from this, right? They listen to us, right? They track us. You know, people, conspiracy theorists are worried about, you know, microchips and vaccines while they carry around their phone all day long. It's like, you don't have to worry about the microchip, you paid $1,000 for it. Right, and so, yeah, I think the technological question, right, that we just feel like technology is a thing that just happens, it comes from nowhere, but it comes from somewhere. It comes from, you know, Elon Musk is making those decisions about what your future will be and what this planet will be like in the future, which is a terrifying thought. And the surveillance, right, the surveillance technology is also, you know, pervasive throughout this, like it's the panopticon. And also with, you know, pros and cons, right? Everything is recorded, you know, as with all of us now. Like, you walk by somebody's front door and the doorbell camera is taking you, right? There's CCTV cameras. And this is, you know, not just true in the US, and we're constantly surveilled. And, you know, without, you know, giving anything away in the novel that both has, you know, very creepy implications, right? That you're being surveilled, like that surgery is in relationship to like the surveillance and the facial recognition technology. On the other hand, it also offers a level of safety and security that people like, right? And, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about it's clearly ambivalent in the book.
It is ambivalent. So I'm going to answer that question. I'll begin by answering it by sharing with you guys the epigraph to the book. So it's a quote from Paracelsus, who was a physician and alchemist in the 1400s, was not writing about technology, but this is the quote. "Poison is in everything, and no thing is without poison. The dosage makes it either a poison or a remedy." And when I first encountered that quote, it just struck me, like, everything is a poison, but it just depends upon how you dose it. It can either be a remedy or it can be dangerous. And I really feel that way about our technologies. Like, it's amazing. These are amazing. These are amazing. I can get where I need to, like, I can find myself, the little dot of myself on a map. I can navigate through the world. My children can FaceTime with their grandparents who live in a different state. They can't even imagine, like, not being able to FaceTime with someone who lives far away from you. AI can do incredible things in terms of analyzing data for cancer research. Like, I love technology, right? I'm not anti-technology, but I also think that the downsides of, the way social media is called social, but it really actually breaks down community a lot of times. I think that people behave in a way and bully in a way online that they wouldn't elsewhere. And we can be surveilled all the time, and you said in our conversation the other day, it's so hard to be subversive now because you're being watched more than you used to be. There are all these really scary negative effects, but it's a gray area. And indeed, so even as I was finishing up the edits on the book, my daughter, she was 10, and she was like, "I really want to walk the mile to school by myself." And I was like, okay. So that's cool that she wants that independence, but I'll feel a lot better if I can track her. And I'm like writing a book about kids having buddies that track them and how bad that is, etc. And so finally I get her this little watch and I can watch her walk to school on it. And I'm like, okay, this is great. Like, she has independence. Yes, I'm surveilling her every second, but I wouldn't let her walk without that. I guess in the olden days they would just let the kid walk and trust the world, and maybe I have less trust of the world than people used to have, and I don't know if I should or shouldn't trust the world. But I just feel, this gets back to this super important quote, "We are all villains, the system only gives us villainous options." Like, I am a total hypocrite. I don't know who isn't a hypocrite. I order things on Amazon. I surveil my children. We are in a system that doesn't really offer us a lot of options. Or if we want to really resist, then we have to make some pretty dramatic lifestyle changes that are annoying.
and we have to define what is resistance, right? So you could give up all of this technology and all of this convenience and ability, but to what extent, if you are the resistance to ecological collapse, if you're the resistance to American fascism, right? How much of giving up all that technology is also unilateral disarmament, right? And so to what extent can you turn these tools against the system? And you have to think very carefully about, there was a time, I've been around a while. I remember when the internet happened, right? And everybody said this is going to be a great democratizing factor, right? Democracy is just going to flourish because of the internet. Right? And so here we are 30 years later preparing for a fascist regime, right? And so that didn't work out quite the way we expected. So there was a lot of thought about how can we harness this against the power structure, but it's also the power structure gave us this. So yeah, there are only villainous options.
There are only villainous options, and I don't know if I don't order from Amazon, if I personally don't order from Amazon and then have to find the little part for my sink somewhere in New York City, is that really doing much?
There is nothing you can do individually except organize collectively.
Yeah.
It's a
So
throwaway.
collective action, it was interesting because I don't know if you remember this, but I began the interview by saying, "What are you worried about?" And I ended the interview by saying, "What gives you hope?" And everyone I interviewed for the book, I would say that. I would begin, "What are you worried about and what gives you hope?" And people had different answers to what they're worried about based on what field they were in. But when I said what gives you hope, everyone said collective action. It gives me chills to say it. I mean, it sounds so easy or simplistic, but like that's what experts said, collective action.
So it's a hard thing to do in the United States where the ideology is individualism, 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 right? Go back to the advertising quote, which is focused on individualizing you, right, and separating you and making you feel anxious, right? I mean, that's what advertising does, right? It makes you feel bad about yourself, right? It's a billion-dollar industry, right? And so when you feel bad about yourself, it's hard to organize with other people, right? You're trying to fix what's wrong with you, and advertising is always telling you you're defective, right? You're defective. You're ugly, your body shape isn't right, you smell bad, nobody's gonna like you, nobody's gonna wanna hook up with you, right? Like you're somehow horribly deformed, but if you buy this stuff, you give us money, we'll give you this plastic thing that will temporarily make you whole, right? And we receive that like it's ubiquitous, like in the novel, right? I mean, the advertising is ubiquitous, like we're being hammered with it all the time. And it's hard to organize with other people when you're dealing with that. And also, and it's not unrelated to the social media anxiety in the novel too, which is the curation of a digital image of self, right? And this constant anxiety about how are others perceiving me, right? It comes out of the advertising. It's like your digital media presence is your advertising for you. What's the product you're selling? Me. Look at me, I'm wonderful. I go to wonderful places. I have great experiences. I look good in this light, right? All of those things, and then the anxiety that goes into constructing that in such a way, which is, a key element of the book that I don't want to talk about right now. But so the advertising and the anxiety and the individualism that prevent us from organizing collectively are also part of the system, right? It's built into the system, and it helps keep us down, right? So the advertising is keeping us down. And I know we're getting close to being out of time, so I don't want to end this without talking to you, because I talked about anxiety. Let's talk about anxiety, right? Because no contemporary author that I'm aware of conveys the pervasive anxieties of our time the way you do, right? That's the thing. I mean, whenever I read your work, this is not the first work of yours I've read, my first thought is like, are you okay, right? And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, I feel that, right? And so I guess I want to say, like, there's the parent in the book feels anxious, right? And I'm sure you've noticed it, but it struck me very closely. A bad thing happens the one moment the parent relaxes. There's one moment when the parent relaxes, and the outcome of that is not good, right? So just like we should be anxious all the time about our kids, right? So I guess I want to say, is your creative work like a symptom or a cure or both?
Yeah. Am I okay? That's a nice way of asking, am I okay? Okay, so I actually recently got asked this in an interview, like, how did you preserve your mental health while you were writing such a dark book about the future? And my answer was, actually, the book is the mental health. Like, these images are kicking around in me. It's not like I'm not worrying about the future, not worrying about late-stage capitalism, not worrying about the future that awaits my children and you and your children. And the book is a way to kind of get those images that are kicking around inside of me out in some form that can be shared with other people. And so it's cathartic. I mean, it's cathartic. I want the book to do more than just give me personal catharsis, right? But it's at least a starting point to like have a conversation and feel maybe a sense of that collective action. Like it's not only, as I have published this book and gone into the world, like a lot of the anxieties that I'm dealing with in the book, perhaps unsurprisingly, like they're totally being reflected back at me by my audience members. Like readers are like, I'm feeling that way too. And so there's a real lessening of loneliness to share with people. And so, no, the writing is a sign that I am okay. I understand why it doesn't seem that way, but it is actually the most okay thing that I can do.
No, and the fact that I have that response indicates you've done a really great job. No, you've really effectively conveyed that. I mean, you really do. One final question, which is, do you think our technology judges us?
what do you, tell me more. Now I'm intrigued.
right,
Probably, yes.
so there's a point with AI, like artificial intelligence, like we feed all of our information into the technology. Like, what books do you read? What music do you listen to? Where do you like to travel? What makes you laugh? What doesn't make you laugh? Like, all of that, you're constantly feeding into your phone everything about you all the time, so it can create a picture of you, right? And at some point, it gives you feedback. It's like, you should listen to this music. You should buy this product, right? You should, like, it knows you. And at what point, I mean, in the novel, the hums, a hum appears sentient, right? Not just, programmed, but is having what simulates thoughts and emotions, right? And so, at what point does the technology start judging us?
Well, so one of the earliest inspirations for the book, among some of the others we've discussed, is I was walking home from teaching at Brooklyn College many years ago, and the thought just crossed my mind, I need new dish rags. Like, whatever, I don't know, I need new dish rags. I haven't bought them in 8 years. And so I get home and I open my computer and dish rags are immediately advertised to me. So maybe I felt judged in that. For one thing, I felt penetrated. I was like, oh my God, this knows my desires. Not my deepest desires, but my desires. It's so strange. Did I say it out loud? Like, how did it know? But then also, maybe it feels judgmental if it's like, oh, we're going to offer you dish rags. Like, you're the kind of person. I don't know. It's not the most relatable. And then there's a moment when the husband and wife, they're in the garden, and the kids have gone to sleep, and she goes out into the little yard they have there, and music is playing. And she's really touched because her partner has selected the music she most would want to hear at that moment. And then after that amazing song, and they're like looking up at the sky, another amazing song plays. It was like just what she was craving. And then a third time. And so after they lie on the grass listening to this music together, like romantic moment, she's like, that's so, you know me so well, like you picked just the songs that I would want. And he's like, no, I didn't pick those are just what's playing here. So she's like a stereotype of what someone would want. She had felt like this deeply authentic personal moment, and in fact it was just an algorithm. So I feel like that happens a lot, and it can be weird when the algorithm gets it wrong, like if you're undergoing fertility treatment and they advertise Pampers to you, which I've had my friends go through that, like they're sort of on the opposite end of the pregnancy experience. It can be weird if it gets it wrong, maybe even weirder though if it gets it right, and you're like, wow, okay, you know me better than my best friend, like you just offered me what I wanted. So yeah, I think is judgment the right word? That implies sentience. The hum at the end kind of goes rogue. I won't say anything more about that, but yeah, I think our technology certainly holds informed opinions of us, very informed opinions, too informed.
You want to open it up for questions?
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to go back to AI. I think I feel very passionate about AI.
Yes.
Honestly, in my eyes, AI is basically like the atomic bomb of the modern day, and its dangers extend way past just unemployment and the environment. Like, for example, you use AI to scan people, like impersonate voices or faces of people, like family. You also use it to spread misinformation, use it to frame people, getting fired, make deepfake sexual content of other people. And the sucky thing, especially with AI, is that anyone can use it. It's not like restricted to those in power. Like, as long as you have a phone or that's access to a website, you can pretty much do any of those things right now. And I wanted to ask, how do you feel about people kind of like seeing AI in the future? Like, do you think people are going to see AI as something that's harmful, or do you think people are going to find ways to justify it or restrict it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wrote the book. When I'm writing a book, I start with what I'm anxious about, and AI, I'm so anxious about it, and that was a huge to go back to the theme of anxiety, that was a huge impetus for me to write the book. And I very much share your concerns about everything you just mentioned. I did read early in my research one book that was a more positive look at it, called The Artist and the Machine, by the Professor Arthur I. Miller, who actually gave a talk here at Brooklyn College that fall of 2019. And he wrote about the positive potentials of human-AI collaborations, which certainly exist. I mean, finding a cure for cancer is, to me, a pretty unambiguous positive outcome. But as you say, all of these other horrible, horrible, really destructive, I mean, atomic bomb-like consequences, I don't think that's really an exaggeration. It's very different from a literal bomb, but it has such far-reaching effects. And I definitely want to hear your answer to this question, too. But when I was writing the book, so I have a fantasy, and this is really a fantasy, but would there ever be a way to create an AI that was truly ethical? Could we ever make an AI that used all of humans' wisdom and best impulses? Is anyone trying to do that? I don't know. So the AI in the book has an element of that, like of actually being wise, being helpful to humans. And this is sort of an idea I'm putting out there because I want us to aspire to that, even if it maybe will remain in the realm of fantasy. And the other thing that the AI in my book does by the end of the book is it actually, oh, this is such a spoiler. I'm going to try to put it in a way that's not a spoiler. The AI understands humans well enough to know when to withdraw itself and let humans have their own moment. So I want us to put our energies into creating an AI that is wise, that is ethical, that is helpful. I don't think that's happening. I wish it would. But do you want to answer that question?
Sure. The system only gives AI villainous options, right? Because, I mean, to understand technology, all technologies have the potential, various technologies, to do good things and bad things. Right? Although a lot of technology represents the interests and the goals of the institutions that create it. And so if our primary technology producing institutions are corporations and the military, then it's going to aim for, trajectory is broadly going to be profitability, right? Like concentrating capital and maximizing kill ratios. That's what you can expect from technology in the current political economy, which is not the good news. Could AI potentially in a different political economic structure do wonderful things? Absolutely, right? But launched into this political economic structure, it's not likely to do those things because it's going to do the things like every technology is sold for its medical benefits. It's going to cure cancer. Everything is going to, I did a lot of research on nanotechnology, like very microscopic technology, which can be used to like destroy individual cancer cells, and anybody who's doing research on that will tell you that's the thing, right? But that's not the thing, right? The thing is phenotype, like specific nanoweapons that can identify your genetic codes and then kill you based on that. You won't know because it's an aerosol and you've inhaled the weapon. Okay, that's very scary. All right, so
you mentioned that 5 years. I remember you spoke about this 5 years ago, and it freaked me out, and it's freaking me out.
that's what gives me anxiety.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think, you know, if we want our technology to do those good things that we want it to do, then we have to change the political and economic structures in which those technologies are being launched.
You mentioned that there were a couple things that didn't quite fit with the plot, but that were interesting that you learned. Were there, like, could you share, like, maybe one or two of
Oh,
those?
that's
that you
such a
really
good question.
interested?
Oh my gosh, I want to remember the things for you. I mean, so much of it was sort of really specific facts about, like how many trees paper towels require, or stuff kind of that sort of just like I actually did, but then I found a way to incorporate it, and I mentioned it in terms of how many trees we kill to make toilet paper. That one did make it into the book. I read a book, The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells, and that book is pretty troubling. I'm sure you've read it. But it had a lot of interesting stuff about, you know, the way migration patterns for animals have been shifted. A lot of stuff about, I actually had the opportunity to meet the author David Wallace Wells, and he said, we get so preoccupied with sea level rise, but there are other threats that are more pressing than that. I think something about the ocean rising just seems really concrete, but heat, like extreme heat and air quality are really big. So I have those in the book a little bit, but some facts related to that, like it's very interesting and disturbing, but I just couldn't just come out and like have the fact in the book, so it was that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You said like AI can replace people's jobs, but like wanted to like ask you like, do you think AI can like help authoritarian regimes maintain power at least? So like,
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think that when you have, you know, like potential election interference, and I think that also just any technology that's confusing our understanding of what is true, and like algorithms that are feeding us only the content that they think we want to see, so that we aren't ever being exposed to ideas that are outside of what we're seeking out. You know, I think that we can get more siloed and siloed off into thinking in a certain way and get that reinforced. And I think that that has happened in our country, and it just means that we all are existing in almost these personalized realities created by whatever algorithms we're exposed to, and we don't have enough of a common language or common understanding.
yeah, because in China, like they usually like facial recognition cameras pick the AI, because like when you're trying to write, like when you're China, right, like they have cameras that could like analyze your face and like connect it to a database. Like you're like citizenship where you're from, your ethnicity, like security cameras, like they can be updated to use AI, facial recognition. Like the United States is doing it, every country is doing it.
Yeah. Yes, and I mean in particular with the Uyghur population in China, that's been a real issue, and I did read about that. But if you think about it, we also have done that with our social media and what we post on social media. There was a big article by Kashmir Hill in the New York Times that came out during the time I was writing a book, and it was about Clearview AI, which has basically scraped the internet of all the images and can identify people in all sorts of situations from this. So we have, it's actually not created by the government, it's created by a corporation, but we have created a surveillance state.
And the corporations are now the government, right? Co-President Musk, right? And so, yeah, I mean, the terror of that is that you can be identified and pulled out of a crowd anytime, anywhere, right? And you don't know what's coming, right? You're tracked everywhere, all the time, right? And then if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like it's your moral responsibility to resist, say, I don't know, fascism, the risk to that, it increases the risk, right? There was a time when you could, you know, engage in resistance, and maybe you could run away at some point and then hide. You cannot run away, you cannot hide, you cannot be not identified. So it's all or nothing now. You either submit and obey, or you're identified as a rebel.
I don't want that to be the takeaway from this.
Oh yes, right. Okay.
We have time for one more
Okay.
question.
Okay.
Here, maybe two more questions.
Okay, two more.
And we wrap it up.
Okay, they're from my students, so yeah, okay.
You were talking a lot about the idea of community mind, like wanting to pull together to fix issues. But then there's also the act of, is the AI judging you? And then also the AI a morality specter for it. It kind of reminded me of the movie Megan, how originally the AI was created to be a toy or a safeguard for this little girl who was grieving. But then when she got exposed to multiple different human behaviors of what was considered normal, like a boy picking on a girl, most people consider that normal. But she took it to where, oh, you're picking on her, it's my job to defend her, and so she went to the extreme. So my kind of thought process and my question was, do you think there'll be a common algorithm that will exist where AI will feel like it's doing the right job of human mindsets, or do you think it's going to always be that turn of what is right, what is wrong, give the AIs one?
I haven't seen that movie, although that sounds really intriguing. I don't know, I mean, I go back to what Ken said, that the people that are developing the AI, that is the agenda that it will answer to. So I want it to answer to the agenda of a university like Brooklyn College, and you guys, and professors like, you know, people in the philosophy department. I want that to be how AI is developed. But I think that depending on who develops it, that will be the agenda that it has. And in the book, I do make that apparent, not militarily in this book so much, although we do learn that Hums are used a lot by police forces, but in terms of advertising and corporations.
Yeah, and I want to say, it is possible to get democratic control over the technological trajectory, but you have to organize collectively to exert that democratic control, right? We used to have an Office of Technology Assessment in this country. It's harder, that was before the Reagan administration, right? Because Reagan eliminated it, just like he eliminated the fairness doctrine in the media, and we see what that has brought upon us. But there should be a system by which any technology, any major investment in technology is vetted by the public, like participatory budgeting for research and development and technology. What do we want? Like, what do we want? I talk to communities about this, right? What do you want your neighborhood to be in 20 years? What do you want your society to be in 20 years? What technologies would help you get there, will help us get there? What technologies are problematic, will be obstacles to that? And then exert that control. So in part, what has to happen is we need to take our democracy back. And I know this seems like an odd moment to make that case, but that's really what it would take.
Final question.
Yeah, in the beginning of the talk, you said something about how the characters are kind of what the book is about, that you have this like really charged setting, and I'm wondering, when you're putting these kind of bits into the setting of the book, like, how are you negotiating if they're supporting the setting, or if they're supporting the characters, or if they're doing both?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the weaving is so complicated, but I do think that that's almost a craft question, because it's hard to write a scene where you're, you know, putting climate change in action with capitalism. What does that even mean? Those are abstractions. But it's very easy to write a scene where a mother is feeling guilty walking down the street with her children. So I just think that by having this be sort of the context and the setting, but then having these characters who are having intense human emotions and interacting with the people that they're closest to, that's how a story can move. I mean, you know, I like to give weird assignments and obstructions, like maybe I should give the assignment, write a story about capitalism or something, but I think it's hard to do. Like, it's much easier just in a sheer writing a scene way to write a scene among people. And that's also, as much as I'm interested in and stressed about all of these things, I'm also, you know, preoccupied with trying to be a parent, trying to be a partner, trying to be a person in the world, and so it is always grounded in that.
And I guess I want to say, to me, a good novel, which this is, or a good film, is very sociological. Of course, I'm a sociologist, so I would think that. But you know, in the Millsian sense, C. Wright Mills said, you know, sociological imagination is sort of occurs at the intersection of history and biography, right? And so the historical context shapes the lives we live and the relationships we have and the experiences we have. And so you create this historical context of climate breakdown and AI and all of that, and then people, and then we experience, if you read about that as a book about AI and climate change, all right, it's abstract, but if you read about it as people having their lived experience of their real lives and trying to get through, then it really communicates powerfully, which is why, again, environmental social scientists, environmental natural scientists have to be working with creatives, have to be working with the humanities to communicate this, or people will hear it, but they won't feel it, and it won't matter. And you help people to feel it, so it really makes a difference.
Thank you. Well, thank you for all of the information from the interview. It was a real inspiration.
modeling what real collaboration looks like, right? And thank you for sounding the alarm about our future. And thank you all for being here and being part of the conversation. Thank you very much.